Hey everybody, and welcome to Epic Everyday, our weekday podcast for busy, stressed out Christians who want to do more than just get through the week. I'm Liz Frericks, and this is my husband Evan.
Hi.
And we're so glad you guys are here with us on this wonderful Tuesday.
Yes, good morning. And thank you for spending part of your Tuesday with us. We really appreciate that. If this episode is interesting to you or helpful, please share it with a friend.
So this week, we are talking about shining in the darkness, being a light in the darkness, how ministry is, that's part of our job as Christians. And today's CSC is surrender, so we thought we'd talk about how weakness is where God works.
Yeah, because who wants to be weak and who wants to surrender to that kind of our natural limitations and the way we are. I mean, we are weak.
Right.
And the best ministers recognize that.
Yeah.
And the most effective people.
Well, it's because the darkness that's around us, I think so much of that is pride and self-sufficiency and invulnerability. Just this idea that, especially in the United States, the idea that like we can pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. We don't need anybody.
Yeah, I think it's easy for a minister or a leader to have a tendency to want to be like that. We get it in our head that that's what makes a good leader. I keep saying leader, but that's what makes a good minister is this person who, yeah, I don't know. Like, unfortunately, I think a lot of pastors, I've heard this many places from our own pastor and from others as well, that you're kind of trained in seminary to be this island, you know, where you don't have friends in your own congregation and stuff like that.
Right.
And then we all look up to someone like that as members of the church. And we're like, oh, well, I mean, look, he's just him and Jesus out there.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
and,
if you don't know, oh yeah, they have all these other connections outside of the church.
Or it's arguable that it's appropriate to have them in the church as well, friends in your own church.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I think a lot of people don't necessarily know who the person in leadership's friends are.
Right. But like we're saying today that, yeah, the most effective leaders are consciously fighting those three things: pride, independence, and invulnerability. Like,
yeah,
those are not the qualities we're looking for.
Right. Well, and they're kind of a lie. Like, they're kind of a mask across what's actually true. I was thinking about this, because in 1 Corinthians 1:26, Paul says, "Brothers, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. He chose the lowly things of the world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him." Coming from a place where I knew I had totally destroyed my life before I became a Christian, and I had hit the point where I was like, okay, well, there's nothing left.
Mm-hmm.
I've wrecked everything, I definitely feel that, but it's still easy for me as someone who has been many times in, some kind of ministry position to try to look like I've got it all together,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a huge, yeah. I guess that's pride, but it doesn't feel like pride necessarily when you're in it, because you feel like, I've got to be an example. I've got to be encouraging to people. I can't go up there and just be so lost in my junk that I'm not an effective leader or something. Like, it's kind of tricky.
But even just, person to person ministry, when someone else is hurting, it's easy to try to seem like you're the one that's got it all together so you can help them.
Yeah, like, I'm just going to be really good at patting you on the head and listening and saying whatever all the right things are.
Right, yeah.
So to be light bearers here, it's going to take flipping those things on their head, and it's going to lead to a lot of discomfort.
Seriously.
And then we have to surrender to that. A good leader is going to cry with people when they're hurting. I mean, and celebrate people when they're celebrating.
Well, a good light bearer. I mean, everybody's called. It's okay.
We talked about leadership last week. I keep coming back to that, but it's similar.
Yeah, I mean, it's every single Christian is called to be a light And part of being a light in darkness in the midst of all that pride and self-sufficiency and invulnerability is to be humble. You know, we've talked before on the show about how much God calls us to be humble. It says God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. And we've talked about how humility is not humiliation. Humility is having a right estimation of yourself. Kind of what Paul was just talking about there in 1 Corinthians 1, where it's like, okay, what were you before God called you? Oh, yeah. You didn't have it all together. So why do you think you have to have it all together now?
Right. Yeah, that's such a bizarre thing, but it's totally happens. And so that's why ministry requires surrender. We're constantly having to surrender to, I think that's a great callback to remember the way you were before. I mean, we change, but in a lot of ways we don't change that much. Our need for grace doesn't change. Our need for a Savior never changes.
Right. Well, and the dependence part, how we need to depend on God instead of being independent ourselves. We read from that passage last week. So it's in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 7. To keep me from becoming conceited because of these surpassingly great revelations, there was given me a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses and insults and hardships and persecutions and difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. And I just have this picture of yeah, we all hate being weak, and it is extremely uncomfortable to deal with the reality of that. But I have this picture of all of us kind of measuring our strength and being like, see, I'm so strong, but we're all like ants, We're like, look, I'm one of the strongest ants.
I have a speck of dirt.
Right, exactly. And God's like, okay.
Yeah.
That's so great that you think that, but let's talk about this. Mm-hmm. Let's deal with what's real here.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a great example. It's impossible to minister without surrender. I mean, because with surrender, that ant then is able to use Jesus' strength to pick up a tree or something instead of just a speck of dirt.
Right. We're empowered to do the ministry God's called us to do. And if we're not surrendered, we don't have the power to do what we're supposed to do.
And nobody would look at an ant who'd picked up a tree or a car and say, that's a really strong ant. They'd say, that ant's really channeling some awesome power.
Right.
And God would be glorified.
Yeah, or they might be like, that ant got thrown in a vat of radioactive whatever, clearly.
Maybe it got bit by a human.
There we go.
Could be Ant-Man instead of Spider-Man. No.
Man-ant.
Man-ant.
Anyway.
An ant with the strength of a human.
Because humans can pick up trees.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we want to be humble and weak, and we want to be vulnerable. We want to peel away the masks to ourselves, because sometimes we lie to ourselves about who we are, and we want to be vulnerable with other people, because that's what connects us. Yeah,
this is where self-inspection comes in, this all-important tool that's constantly with us. We don't do all the self-inspection that we need to do in our 20s, and we're good to go for the rest of our lives or something. This is a tool that gets used over and over again, and but I like what you said. It's this with other people. We can do it just us and God, and we can be like, God, search my heart and know me, and that's really great work. But pairing that with vulnerability with another person is just it's super healing, and it's super important to ministry. It breaks down pride. It breaks down all those problems we talked about earlier. It breaks down independence and invulnerability as well. Mm-hmm. And we need to stay broken down in those areas, because we have a tendency to try to build ourselves back up when nobody's looking.
Yeah. And that makes us not good ministers of the gospel.
Mm-hmm. And being broken down, Jesus was a suffering servant. He was broke down all the time. And that leads to authentic ministry. And that's what we want to be as Christians.
As always, pick whether today is going to be awesome or not, whether you're going to strengthen those neural pathways to look for the good in your life or to look for the not good in your life. Like that verse that I read yesterday out of Philippians 2, where you're going to start with complaining and arguing, or are you going to start with, here's what God's doing that's good? We love you guys, and we are praying for you. Thanks to everybody that's been listening to the show and sharing the show. We really appreciate it. If you have found this episode helpful, please do share it. And come back tomorrow, and we're going to continue our discussion on shining like lights in the dark.
Yeah, we're going to talk about death to self, which is important, but also we still stay ourselves at the same time, which is important to God. I love that tension of that. We could talk about it a lot.
Yeah, so come back tomorrow. We can talk about it more.
Yeah. See you then.
Have a great Tuesday.